Queen Victoria's first child, her daughter, Princess Victoria, went to agonizing lengths to make her mother proud and impress her. She later became the Empress of Prussia. Princess Victoria was able to rise very high, but her life ended with a giant crash. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Victoria was born a disappointment. She was born to the young Queen and her husband Albert on the 21st of November, 1840. Queen Victoria had written in her letters that if the baby was born a girl, that she would drown the babe. So when she gave birth to her first child, who was a daughter, she was deeply disappointed. Even the doctor delivering the baby knew of the profound disappointment when he announced that the Queen had sadly had a girl. This was already a bad start, considering she wished for a boy immediately after birth, when she said, "Don't worry, the next one will be a boy." When she grew up, she went on to have issues with her mum. She grew up to be very intelligent, which her father loved, and they grew very close to each other. Prince Albert and the family lovingly called her Vicky for the rest of her life. Her mother's relationship was very different. Although Victoria did love her daughter in her own way, their relationship was chilly and distant. This was perhaps due to her strict upbringing in the palace. The reason she grew up to be so intelligent was because she had to follow a rigorous educational schedule. She was expected to perform perfectly, with exceedingly high expectation placed upon her. Prince Albert even went on to write a book about how he tried to educate his heirs to the highest level. She went to great lengths to please her family. Just as her father was an overachieving and talented man, Vicky would follow in his footsteps. She spent most of her days learning everything from arithmetic to philosophy and took on liberal ideas. Part of her learning started at a very young age, and at 18 months old she was expected to learn French, and she would later go on to learn German from the age of 4. She was becoming an eligible princess, fit to enter the marriage market. As was often the case in royal families, they started scouting for a suitor from a young age. Vicky was only 11 when a match with a man 8 years older than her, at 19 years old, called Prince Friedrich Wilhelm. He was an heir to the kingdom of Prussia, and he became a potential match. At still only 11 years old, it was arranged for the very young Vicky to meet this older man in 1851 at the Great Exhibition in London. The 11-year-old child and the adult man were getting on brilliantly. She was impressing him with her fluent German, which was the prince's native language, and she was eager to put her talents to the test to bag herself an eligible suitor. This would go on to become one of the most stirring romances of the Victorian era. The prince returned home after his visit, but the pair kept in contact through writing letters. These letters between the pair got steamier and steamier as the years went on. They wrote to each other for 4 years, until the young girl was aged 15 and he was 23. Her pen pal lover would take the relationship to the next level when Friedrich returned to Britain in 1855, under the veil of diplomatic reasons. However, it was obvious that he was in love with the English princess, and he had come to visit to determine whether she was suitable to be his wife. Against all odds, she was. Frederick's family were disappointed in his match with Victoria. They were outraged by his crush on her, as they believed the British monarchy was not an absolute monarchy, and therefore it was weaker than other monarchies in the world. They wished for him to marry a Russian archduchess instead, but his love for the English princess was made all the more complicated by others perceiving her as ugly on top of everything else that they despised about her. Vicky was slightly older at 15 years old, and this was a more acceptable age for marriage, but she was still small at only 4'11", and she looked very similar to her mother with a round face, which was not the epitome of beauty at the time. Vicky was not made to feel much better about these facts when her own mother worried that Friedrich would get one glimpse of her and walk away. But that's not what happened at all. Vicky needn't worry, the pair got on amazingly when they were able to meet in person once again, and after only 3 days together, the prince proposed with the approval of Queen Victoria, with only one rule in place, that they waited until she was 17 years old before they got married. This was 4 years of communication and love in the making. They were finally together officially, but their future was far from a fairy tale, because the Prussian people hated her and the British people hated her groom more. The news of a royal wedding normally storms up excitement and celebration in the public, but not this time. The Prussian people were disappointed in Friedrich's choice in bride, and the British public were not a fan of Vicky's groom either. They branded his family a miserable dynasty in the press. There were few moments of peace between the two joining families, and they quarrelled over the wedding details. The Prussian family were much more traditional than the British royal family. Vicky had requested to bring 2 of her own ladies-in-waiting with her to the foreign land, but she was met with a hard and cold 9 from Berlin. With the wedding approaching, the fighting did not stop there. It got worse because her mother insulted her husband's family. The Prussian family, as the family of the groom, they wanted to take charge of the wedding, and they demanded that things went their way. They insisted that the pair marry in front of the Prussian court in Berlin, but Queen Victoria brutally responded that she absolutely would not stand for that. Luckily for her, she got her own way, with the wedding taking place in the St. James's Palace in London. Despite all of the issues between the family, the couple did go on to have a fairy tale wedding on the 25th of January 1858. Vicky wore a flouncing Honiton lace confection, complete with an enormous 3-yard train and delicate wreaths of orange and myrtle blossoms. As the bride of the groom with his own royal family, Vicky was set for a future in his native land, and so she joined him in Berlin shortly after, where things did not go any smoother now that they were newlyweds, because their in-laws were monsters, hell-bent on making her life hell. Despite the issues, both Friedrich and Vicky were young and in love, and they would have been looking forward to a beautiful honeymoon period. But after years of quarrelling between the two families, and with years of growing hate towards Vicky, and they let her know on many occasions, with very public insults from his extended family. Not only did they publicly humiliate, they also punished her without words by putting them up in their new home, which was far from a show of opulent wealth. Frederick's uncle, King Friedrich William IV, was the ruler of Prussia, and just like everybody else, he was not keen on the match, but it was too late. Instead, he gave them a chilly reception and sent them to live in a derelict wing of the Berlin Royal Palace. This section of the building was shabby and outdated, and it didn't even have a bath. Her in-laws continued to dislike her, and despite having similarities in their political views, with both being liberal. This must have been very hard for a young girl of only 17 years old, surrounded by a family that did not warm to her. They did, however, expect her to perform her royal duties, which often included appearing at formal dinners and public performances every night, usually staying past midnight. Then she would have to wake up at the crack of dawn, get dressed in full regalia, and greet people at 7 a.m. Vicky had always been caught in the middle of the Prussian and British courts. She was encouraged to remain a British princess first and foremost by her mother, but was required to be a Prussian princess by the other. She could not win, until eventually she was made to make an impossible decision. When the Duchess of Orleans, a distant relative of both her and her husband's family, died, this led to a choice being made. The British family mourned and wore black for a month, while the Prussians did so for only a week. She made the wrong choice in the eyes of her mother. She decided to mourn for 7 days, alongside her husband's family. Queen Victoria berated her daughter for not sticking to English traditions. She received many demanding letters from the Queen, until Prince Albert insisted that the Queen stop. Petty disagreements broke out as a result of the hobbies that Vicky decided to take up. She had always enjoyed gardening and decided to start this in her new home. The Prussians took this as an attack on their gardening styles, and when the princess took inspiration from geometric and simple English gardens, this led to a battle to make the palace's gardens as leafy as possible. Join me in part 2 to learn how the royal couple struggled financially and how they grew their family, giving birth to a son who would go on to become the Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany. Join me in learning about his traumatic birth that led to a lifelong disability. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Please comment, like and subscribe if you wish for more stories, and leave your suggestions below and I will endeavour to cover them.